Okay, so I guess we're ready to start. Shalom, everybody. Welcome back. Shavua Tov. A new beginning, Shabbat Shkalim, which is the beginning point, the beginning Shabbat, the beginning change, noticeable change in this period, which starts this Shabbat Shkalim, this past Shabbat, and believe it or not, ends all the way by Shavuot. We're starting now a whole section of the year, the preparation for a new beginning. Like we said last week, if you recall, Rebbe Nachman said that initially all beginnings were from Pesach, but now he indicated that all beginnings start from Purim, Purim being the preparation for Pesach, and this Shabbat Shkalim plus the Shabbat Zachor, which will be before Purim, these two Shabbatot are preparations for Purim. So we are starting now from this whole period of Shkalim all the way to prepare to receive Pesach. And the goal of Pesach, believe it or not, is to get to Shavuot, the 50th day, the 50th gate, the 50th level, a noticeable change in life for the good, for the better, Bezrat Hashem. That is our hope this year. Each person we should accomplish and get closer to Hashem and to feel good about ourselves, to be happy, to feel the connection with Hashem, to feel it strong, and to see it emanate and disseminate into our activities, into our families and friends and students, etc., and peers. So, just to give a perspective summary of this period based on this lesson. This lesson 44 that we finished last week, and we will now be beginning today, God willing, lesson 45 from the Bridge Likutei Moran, followed by 46, God willing. The main thrust of 44, as you noticed, was connecting to the Holy Land by clapping your hands, specifically during davening, during your prayers. And the goal of clapping the hands, the goal of activating the light of the hands, is to reveal the holiness of the Holy Land. Now, in this lesson 44, Rabbi Nachman mentioned, quoting the teachings of the sages, that whoever fixes a place in their davening, the God of Abraham, the Lord of Abraham, Elokei Abraham be'ezro, the Lord of Abraham comes to help that person. And he explained that fixing a place means stealing a place. By clapping your hands, you reactivate the strength of Hashem's hands, the koach, the 28 sections of the two hands, which activates Hashem's, so to speak, hands, which are reflected in the 28 letters of the very first pasuk, verse of the Torah, which is called Kafchet Atvan de Uvda de Bereshit, the 28 letters of the act of creation, because this pasuk, the opening verse of the Torah, is the means used by Hashem for creation. That first verse, the Zohar calls it Uvda de Bereshit, the act of creation. Using it, Hashem brought out the entire world, God willing. When we Jews clap our hands in this world while davening, we reactivate Hashem's creative force, and that creative force is what was needed. Like Rashi explained in the beginning of the Torah, we mentioned it many, many times already, that this creative force is what's needed to allow the Jews to have conquered the Holy Land, and that no one in the world can say to us, the Jewish people, you guys are robbers, you guys are thieves, you took the land from the 7 nations of Canaan, the land belongs to them. And we say, no, the land belongs to Hashem, and Hashem chooses whenever and however he wants to give it to whomever he chooses, and then to take it away from them and to give it to someone else. And that's exactly what Hashem did. He gave us the Holy Land, and thus, by us finally being on the Holy Land, the people of Israel being on the land of Israel, we reveal the holiness found in it. And this is true for wherever Jews may be throughout the diaspora, that when needed to sanctify and transform the soil that they stand upon to be in the status of the Holy Land, by simply clapping their hands in the davening, this transforms the air atmosphere, and the space that a person, the soil that a person is standing upon, into the holiness of the Holy Land. So again, Rabbi Nachman explains and reads it as follows: whoever steals a place in order to daven, so that the God of Avraham comes to help a person. Avraham, Rabbi Nachman teaches, being the one who revealed, sorry, not activated, you can say activated also, but mainly revealed the holiness of the Holy Land. And Rabbi Nachman in the lesson quotes the Zohar. The Holy Zohar reads it like this. It says the statement expressing how Avraham discovered the Holy Land. It says, Takal betikla ad de itgal yale. He weighed and measured using a scale system, an astrological scale system, which means he did comparison forces based on his knowledge of astrology, and it's like a weight. The word takal in Aramaic is like shokel, mishkol, mishkal. He was weighing. When you weigh, it's always there's one side of the scale and the other side of the scale. So he was comparing using astrology, knowing from the stars and the positioning and their timing and etc., all the things that Abraham knew in astrology, to locate a land that has different classification than anywhere else in the world. And by using this process of elimination through weighing and scaling, using astrology, he came to discover the Holy Land. Or like the Zohar says, it became revealed to him that the attitude of trying to connect to the divine while in the Holy Land is totally different than anywhere else in the world. And that's what prompted Abraham to leave Haran, to leave his land of Aram to go closer to the Holy Land. And he reached to Haran. And at that point, Hashem revealed himself finally to Abraham in a prophecy. And he told him the opening words of Parshat Lech Lecha, which read Lech Lecha. Hashem ordered Avram, go for yourself. Lecha, go and discover your source of your soul, which can only be done if you now enter the Holy Land. So the Zohar says that Avram Avinu is the one to reveal Eretz Yisrael, and this is what Rabbi Nachman is teaching us, that you can daven and reveal the holiness of the Holy Land. Okay, and it comes in the merit of Avraham Avinu, who was the first one to start the revelation of the Holy Land. Meaning what? That a Jew needs, in order to really connect to God, to be undisturbed. Their connection to God can't have foreign influence bothering him. Because Avraham Avinu understood that wherever he stood in the world, the earth had a negative energy influence on him. So there must be a land that cannot influence the person and thus enable a person to have yishuvadat, clarity of the mind, to connect to God. That's why Avraham in the first place was looking for a holy land, because he saw wherever he was, there was negative influence from the earth. He couldn't connect to the God that he was looking for. So there must be a land that has no distraction itself. That's what led him to discover, to look for, to search, and eventually finding the Holy Land, till Hashem himself opened up the door saying, you're right, there is a Holy Land, and here it is. Now you're ready to enter. So Shabbat Shkalim is that purpose. The goal of Shabbat Shkalim, shekel meaning that it's in memory of the half coin that the Jews donated, and all the money, all the proceeds, went towards the Holy Temple, right? So this shekel, believe it or not, is connected to the wording of the Zohar by Avraham, where it says also takal betikla. He measured using his scaling abilities of comparison and process of elimination to measure and to weigh until he identified a land that doesn't have the same spiritual qualities and energy like any other land. So that was the idea of his weighing. And it happens to be that the word for weighing, takal in Aramaic, which means shokel, is the same word as the coin used in Hebraic terminology as a shekel, the half shekel coin, which was collected as the use as the census to count the amount of Jewish people that were around, and that money would go towards the Holy Temple. So there is a connection here of the scaling of Abraham to find the Holy Land and the donation of the Jewish people towards the Holy Temple. Because Rebbe Nachman teaches, if you remember, we mentioned it last week, that one of the ways to connect, another way to connect to the Holy Land is by giving charity to the Holy Land. Tzedakah. When a Jew gives of his blood money to the Holy Land, this is another way to connect to Eretz Yisrael. So now on Shabbat Shkalim, we read we read the Torah portion which talks about the census and the collection of the half shekel coins in order to count the number of the Jews, and that money went towards the Holy Temple. Us, the Jewish people throughout the world, by reading this extra Torah portion on Shabbat Shkalim, it is meant to connect us wherever we may be, however we may be, however low and detached and disconnected to the Holy Land we may be, because we must remember that when you're feeling detached and empty and far from God, that is basically an expression of a person being far from the Holy Land. Because the attitude of the Holy Land is feeling connected to God. Wherever you are, wherever in the world you feel a connection to Hashem, it's thanks to a light of the Holy Land being connected to you at that moment. And the opposite is also true, that a Jew who feels disconnected, detached, his prayers don't make a difference, Hashem's not listening anyways, I'm so low, as if my prayers and my good deeds are going to move something. That attitude comes from the influence of the diaspora, which Rebbe Nachman calls the land of Edom. Edom, the tribe of Edom, descendants of Esav, and ancestors of Haman and Amalek, are the ones guilty. That influence is what we can blame. Yes, we have permission to blame, to give all the fault of our negative feelings. The pressure we feel is not coming from ourselves, it's coming from the influence of Edom, Haman, Amalek, the diaspora. What happens on Shabbat Shkalim? We get a revelation of the Holy Land. What this does to a person is lets them wake up and realize that you are not the problem. You, who you really are a good neshama. You're a good soul. You have a potential good to connect to God. You to Hashem. You are your yearning and desire. That's who you really are. And all the negativity and all the garbage that's connected and attaching itself to a person is due to the influence of Haman, Amalek, Edom, Esav, you name it, the diaspora, all that. What happens on Shabbat Shkalim, we begin to realize that, hey, I'm not the bad guy here. There's someone inside of me. There's a negative influence inside of me. We call it the Yetzer Hara, yes, the evil urge. But on a practical term, this is Haman, Amalek, Edom, the diaspora. It's this negative influence that has caused me to be how I am. Because Hashem, deep down inside, I want to be a good Jew, but there's so much negative influence, so much negativity bringing me down, weighing me down, not allowing me to connect to the words of prayer, not allowing me to feel my life source being dependent on the words of prayer, that it's oxygen for my soul. That lack of having that is due to Haman, Amalek, Edom, Esav, the land of the diaspora, which Rebbe Nachman called as being tameh, impure land. So Shabbat Shkalim is a gift of now having the weighing, the measurements, the scaling of Avraham Avinu activated, and also it talks about, it commemorates, and it activates the commemoration and memory of the Jews giving the half shekel coin to the Holy Land, to the construct, towards the building and the tachzukah, the maintenance of the Holy Temple, thus connecting the Jewish people to the Holy Land. So what that means again on a practical level, that this Shabbat Shkalim was a wake-up call. It was a wake-up call to remind us that we're not the bad people here. that all year round, Haman, Amalek, and as we know, we mentioned this many times, Amalek has the numerical value as Safek, doubts. And Haman, the sages tell us, is rooted and hinted to in the Torah in the tree of knowledge. Hamina etz. God told Adam and Chava, asked Adam and Chava when they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and bad, could it be Hamin ha'etz? Could it be that from the tree that I told you not to eat from, did you eat? So Haman is Hamin, is from the tree of knowledge and good of bad, which means a shape-changing admixture. Haman Amalek, the admixture of shape-changingness, which causes doubts in a person. Meaning that all year round, when we think negative about ourselves, you're never gonna make it. You're so low. Everything's futile. Your davening doesn't make a difference. These thoughts, these convincing arguments that unfortunately succeed in making us feel disconnected and down and cool down, like like it says about Amalek, Asher karcha baderech, who cooled you off. Amalek's work is to cool off the Jewish yearning and desire to connect. That's his job. Like Rashi says, that he's compared to a Belial, Ben Belial, a wild person who, when seeing a burning hot bathtub, he jumps in, even though he gets scolded, but he cooled down the bath so that now other people can enter. So too Amalek, his job is to cool down the Jewish people, to make them cold in their devotion, cold in their connection to Hashem. So this Shabbat again, Shkalim, is a reconnection to the Holy Land. And again, it's as a preparation for Purim. We will explain now how that is. It's the first initial preparation to reconnect the Jewish people to the Holy Land. That's the idea of Shkalim. Then we have coming up, I think this week or next week, Shabbat Zachor, which means what? Remember what Amalek did to you. In other words, it's not you. It's Amalek who's doing to you. You're not the bad guy here. You are your good deeds, your good yearning, your good desire, your wanting to be a better person, your good points. That's who you really are. And remember, Zachor, that you're not the enemy. So first, Shkalim comes to reconnect us to the whole light of the Holy Land. Shabbat Zachor now lets us see the enemy now kicked out of us. He's no longer within. Now we can point our finger and say, remember what Amalek is doing to you. And then finally, on Purim, through all the mitzvah of Purim, and especially the intoxication and the drinking, we're able to blot out and remove totally the influence of Haman Amalek, who has had a major hole specifically in this year. We look at Purim every year as a new stage. Every year has a new attack, a new Haman Amalek, and because of that, every year has a new Purim holiday to wipe out that new level of attack that we have. So we're hoping, God willing, Bezat Hashem, that this Purim we can truly blot out Haman Amalek. When that is done properly, we're hoping through the lights of Purim, the light of Mordechai and Esther, to be able to reach a connection of davening which is fitting to be prayed on the land of Israel's soil, wherever a Jew may be in the meantime, whether he's in Dallas, Texas, or Arizona, or Alaska, or Alabama, or Timbuktu, Australia, wherever, or Thailand, wherever, from there to transform wherever he is to the Holy Land experience and atmosphere, and to feel the davening that is befitting a Jew to really daven with connection and feeling for the words. Because once a Jew is connected to prayer, prayer is the key to everything else. That's why there's such an attack against davening, because here is where the key is. This is where it's proper to invest. That's why there's such an attack from the evil side. So this, if you want to say, is to give us a perspective of this period of the year from the perspective of this lesson that we've done until now, lesson 44. And with that said, we're now going to continue with now lesson 45, where Rebbe Nachman now will give us a different perspective of the power of the hands. Each of these lessons 44, 45, 46 give us different perspectives of what the hands signify and what is done when the clapping of the hands is done. And by extension, you begin to see the power of the hands in general. And you can take a look at Rav Nosson in his writings in the Kutei Halachot. He doesn't just restrict the power of connecting a Jew through just hand clapping, but he goes on to any other devotions which are related to the hands. For example, he brings down in the laws of a synagogue. You have in the Code of Jewish Law, Shulchan Aruch, a section called Hilchot Beit Knesset. The laws of a synagogue. A synagogue has laws. How to make the synagogue, the proper respect. And also, for example, when a person decides to dedicate for example, a parochet or any religious item used in the synagogue, once it's been inaugurated, you can no longer use it for a mundane activity. For example, somebody donates a type of drape covering for the Sefer Torah, for the Holy Torah scroll, or for the bima, the table used for reading, reciting for reading from the Torah scroll. This piece of cloth, which has been now inaugurated, you can no longer use it for another item. And Rav Nosson explains, because you, with your hands, you bought and you took this garment, this special material, to make a type of parochet, a type of a covering, and you then brought it to donate it to a synagogue. So the actions of your hands also, even though you're not clapping here, but now it inaugurated and activated the holiness of the Holy Land, so that now you brought it to a synagogue, and a synagogue is like a miniature temple, which means it's a type of a holiness atmosphere of the land of Israel anywhere in the world that you have synagogues. So when a Jew with his hands donates something to a synagogue, it's like bringing it into the holiness of the Holy Land, and you can no longer transform it to a mundane title, a mundane status, which corresponds to, compared to the synagogue, the diaspora. That's one example Rav Nosson brings. He says, for example, also, when you eat a food item, you must hold the food item in your hand, because by holding in your hand when saying the blessing, the hand that you're holding it in activates also the holiness of the Holy Land, because the hands are really connected to Eretz Yisrael. So just to understand how deep these ideas are and how far-reaching they are, but to give a Jew the value of the hands. Also, for example, the blessings of the Kohanim, the priestly blessings with the hands. Also, when you wake up in the morning, washing your hands, okay, putting on tefillin on your arm, on your hand. All these things, Rav Nosson, he extends them to be connected to and synonymous to the idea of hand clapping. So it's not exclusively limited just to the idea of hand clapping, but other holy devotions that involve the hands. This is what brings a person to connect to the Holy Land. Rebbe Nachman, for example, has an amazing lesson, 61, where he says that when a Jew writes with his hand, or today you can say even types on a computer by extension, on a keyboard, when a person writes or types or whatever insights of Torah, so the movement of the hands typing or writing also etch the shape of the letters that he's typing or writing into the air. So if he's writing the letter Aleph, Bet, he's writing insights. So the pen, the quill moving is also writing the letters in the air. And I would assume on an electronic level, when typing letters, pressing on the A key, B, C, whatever, and writing out words of Torah. So this typing also, movement of the hands, is what activates the holiness of the Holy Land in the air. It's phenomenal. So anything which is an extension of the hands also connects a person to Eretz Yisrael, which is why a person has to really, really guard their hands, not to do evil, to do their best, not to do negativity, because that just brings a person back under the influence of Edom, of Esav, of Haman, of Amalek, the diaspora, the impurity of the world. And the opposite again is true, that by doing good, aseh tov, by just doing good with your hands, this connects a person much, much more with the holiness of Eretz Yisrael. So with all this said, we're now going to continue with lesson 45 from the Bridge Likutei Moran, part 1. There's only, believe it or not, one paragraph on this lesson because it's a short lesson. So he says like this, paragraph 1, which is the only one on lesson 45. Al yedei mechiyat kapayim batfila, by clapping your hands during the prayer service. This is an amazing perspective, a new perspective that we didn't touch upon at all until now. Watch this. Nit orerim kanfei hare'ah. The wings of the lungs become aroused. The lungs of a human being are called kanfei re'ah. They're called the wings, the lobes of the lung. We call them in Hebrew kanfei re'ah, the wings, like a wing. Why are they called wings? Because just as wings, when they hover, they blow cool air. That's what happens in the movement of the birds when they move their wings. So too, the lobes of the lungs, with the cold air, the cold oxygen they bring into the body, they cool off the heat, the immense and intense heat of the heart. Like it says in the Gemara, Ilmale kanfe re'ah de nashvin al liba, hava liba okid kol gufa benura. I think it's from the Zohar, really. If it's the translation is like this: if it were not for the wings of the lungs hovering and blowing, cooling off the heart, the heart would consume with heat and parchness the entire body. The heat of the heart would dry up all the moisture and liquids of the body, God forbid, causing a person to expire. So the coolness of the lungs, of the lobes of the lungs, which is called the wings of the lungs, are what maintains stability and balance between coldness and heatness in the human body. So here Rebbe Nachman is teaching us there's a direct connection between the arms, the hands, and the lungs. Phenomenal. Shemisham nitaveh hadibur. That from the lungs, also, what comes out of the lungs? Speech. How do you speak? You breathe in first air, and then you let it out with the control of the larynx and the lungs and the vocal cords. They're now pressing on the pressure of the air when coming out, like when we're talking right now. So air is coming out, but it's pressurized with the various vocal cords to let out the tone. And of course, the movements of the mouth control the shape of that air coming out. The noise created by the vocal cords, the larynx, the throat, and then the shape given to them by the 5 sections of the mouth, the gutturals, the laterals, all the parts from the teeth, from the roof of the mouth, from the throat, every part. There's 5 sections: the teeth, the lips, etc. So they give shape to the letters, but it's due to the air, thanks to coming from the lobes, the wings of the lungs. Okay, so in our context, praying is speech. Clapping the hands with the davening is to activate properly, he's saying, the wings of the lungs. And we said initially that you're clapping the hands is meant to help, what's it called? It's helped to strengthen and to make much better the words of prayers. It's meant to kick out the distractions and to enable the words of prayer to come out more fully. That's the goal of the clapping of the hands and davening. It's not meant to distract. It's meant to help you in the words of prayer to be more concentrated and more proper and more pure, more complete. So because of that, he's saying the hands activate the lungs because it's helping speech. So by extension, it's helping the quality of the wings of the lungs to generate pure, holy speech while praying. So he goes on, that's number 1. And number 2, he says, and through clapping the hands, and in the hands, totally different than what we spoke about in lesson 44. He goes into the number of fingers. There, in lesson 44, we went into the number 28, the 14 sections of each hand. Here, he's going into the 5 fingers of each hand. So when joining the hands, what happens is like this. When you clap your hands, so you have on each hand, chamesh etzbaot yamin. On the right hand, you have 5 fingers, and you join them clap them on chamisha shebismol, the 5 fingers of the left hand, v'chen lehefer, and also you're clapping the left 5 fingers on the right. It's like this and like this. But when we're doing this, it includes this happening to the right onto the left and to the left on the right. Okay? So it's twofold. It's right on left, clapping your hands right on left, and left on right, which happen anyway simultaneously when clapping your hands any which way you look at it. But we categorize it as left on right and left on right on left, right? The 5 fingers of the right on the 5 of the left, etc. Vice versa. Mi. We create what's called mi, mem yud in Hebrew, which translates as who. And first of all, before we go on to see what's going on here, he's focusing on the numerical value of the word mi. Mem is 40, yud is 10, that's 50. The number 50 has been activated by clapping hands together. Okay? He's going to explain how this happens. And what is 50? What is mi? Gematria Chamishim, like we said, it's the numerical value of number 50. And what is number 50 representing? The Chamishim Sharei Bina. The 50 gates of understanding are activated by clapping the hands, which is the aspect of the Jubilee, Yovel, Bechinat Yovel. The Jubilee year is the 50th year, right after, in the Holy Land of Israel, after counting 7 cycles of Shemitah, the Shemitah cycle, which we know is after every 7 years, we must lay the land to rest. There's no plowing and working the land on the 7th year, which means if the crops have to rot, then so be it. But we're not going to work the land. And any produce that is produced on its own from the land, anyone is allowed to eat of it and consume it without having to buy it. And no tithes have to be taken off. That's called Shnat Shemitah, the sabbatical year. Okay? After 7 sabbatical cycles, we have the 50th year, the Jubilee year, which corresponds to, and I think if you take a look at the gematria, the numerical value, take a look at the word Yovel. You have Yud, which is 10, okay? And then you have Vav, which is 6, and then Bet, that's 8. So that's 18 plus 30. So it's 30 plus 18, that's 48. 1 for the word is 49. So it's meant to say it's 49 leading to the 50th gate. The Jubilee, even though it's the 50th year, in its Gematria itself, somehow it leads to, in the laws of Gematria, you can use another 1 and another 1 to equate it to the number 50. Okay? So he explains, Ki chamesh pa'amim, again, I didn't go so deep into the Gematria, but it's done in 2 ways. It's called kolel, and there's another Gematria rule where you can add another 1 and you have the total for 50 there. So he says like this, Ki chamesh pa'amim chamesh, each hand has 5 fingers. By clapping it on the other hand, that activates not 10, but 5 times 5. So in other words, clapping the 5 fingers of the right hand onto the 5 fingers of the left hand is not just joining, which would have been just 10, but it's multiplied. Why do we say it's multiplied? Why is it 5 times 5 equaling 25, as opposed to 5 plus 5, 2 hands, right hand, left hand, that's 5, and 5 is 10. So it's a rule in Kabbalah that each one of the 5 fingers has in it an energy part of the other 4 fingers. So each one of the 5 has all-inclusive in it another 5. So in that sense, it's 5 which are really all connected. So it's not 5 plus 5 when joining the right to the left. We say it's 5 times 5, because each one has 5 within it. The pinky has the energy of the other 4 within it, and then the forefinger, for example, has the energy of the other 4 fingers in it. The thumb has also the energy of the other 4. So it's 5 times 5. We join it to the left hand. In that sense, it causes 25. And that's from the perspective of the right hand. So we have 25 from the side of the right hand onto the left hand. And now the opposite is also true. The left hand, also 5, onto the right hand. And again, each finger having the energy of the other 4. So in this sense, it's 5 times 5, another 25. So it's 25 plus 25, we look from the perspective of the right onto the left and the left onto the right. That causes the number 50 to be activated. Let's see it inside. Chamesh pamim chamesh gimatria 25, right? 5 times 5 as numerical value of 25. And shtei pamim 25, twice 25, gimatria 50. And these 50 activated by the clapping of the hands, bechinat 50 pa'amim, correspond to the 50 times. And watch this, 50 times of what? Yetziat Mitzrayim shenizkar. If you count in the Holy Torah, how many times the mentioning of leaving Egypt has been mentioned. For example, what we say every day in the Shema, Ani Hashem Elokechem asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem le'Elohim. I am God, your Lord, who has taken you out of Egypt to be for you a Lord. That's in the Parsha of Tzitzit. And you have like that, similar, about mentioning the leaving of the Egypt, 50 places in total from the book of Exodus all the way to the book of Dvarim. Count them, you'll see it's a total of 50. So he's saying that these 50 times that are activated, so the number 50 activated by clapping the hands correspond to the 50 times that the leaving of Egypt is mentioned in the Torah, which is what? Shalideh Bechinat Yovel, the concept of the Jubilee, the 50th year, okay, which is idea of the 50th gates of understanding. That is how we left Egypt. The Zohar explains this idea that Hashem, to get the Jews out of Egypt, he had to shine an initial light from the 50th gate of holiness. As it's taught that when the Jews were in Egypt, they sunk so low, they fell to the 49th level of impurity. That means morally and also in devotion to God, the Jews were on a very, very low status when they were in Egypt. They reached minus 49. And if they would have waited to minus 50, then it would have been almost impossible. But by Hashem, nothing's impossible. But from our perspective, it would have been almost impossible for Hashem to take out the Jews from Egypt. So the Jews reached minus 49. Hashem used a level of holiness above their level, because when a Jew falls, he needs a stronger bulldozer, if you want to say, to pull him out. That means if a person is fallen minus 10, it's not enough plus 10 to pull him out. He needs plus 11. He needs a level which is above his level. So in this case, that the Jews fell to minus 49, it would not have been enough from Hashem's side to activate the 49 levels of holiness, which contrast the minus 49 that the Jews left in Egypt. 49 would not have been enough to pull them out. What's needed is always a higher level, something above, because 49 is not enough. If they're in minus 49 and all you have to offer is plus 49, so there's a fair and equal battle here. We need something to have an upper hand in order to win, to succeed. So for this, the holiness has to be above that. In this context, in this sense, plus 50 to pull out the Jews from minus 49. Then it can work because it has the upper hand, it has an additional level. Okay? So he's saying that the 50 times the Exodus is mentioned in the Torah, okay, is the power, is not by chance. It's to illustrate the power used to get the Jews out of Egypt. Why do you mention 50 times? To let us know that it was the 50 levels of holiness which led the Jews out. The Zohar calls this the power of the Yovel. The Yovel, we said, is the Jubilee year, because on a simple level, the Jubilee year is a time designated also to free any slaves. If a person is made a slave, the Jubilee year has the power to relieve from slavery. Even though this is also common on every 7th sabbatical year, but the 50 year sticks out in that it's on its own. It has unique characteristics to it, the Jubilee year, as contrasting the sabbatical year. And in this sense, it's a more complete redemption, a redemption of slave works, of the land, to be redeemed from ownership by human beings. It goes back to belonging to Hashem. And it's the 50th. It sticks out as being solid and alone, as opposed to sabbatical cycles every 7, every 7, every 7. But here you have a 50th year turning point, which is on its own. the next time will be only after another 50 years, even though it's also a cycle every 50, 50, 50, 50. But because in between, we see also a type of a break called every sabbatical cycle. So in that sense, the number 50 sticks out compared to the sabbatical cycle of 7 years. So now in Egypt, which was a major leaving Egypt was a major turning point for the Jews from bondage to freedom. So we associate it with the Jubilee number 50 year. And also in, like we said, on a spiritual level, it's the 50 levels of understanding, the 50 gates of holiness, the 50 gates of understanding. And corresponding to all this, we see the 50 times that the leaving of Egypt is mentioned in the Torah to tell us that this was the energy used to get the Jews out of Egypt. And here Rebbe Nachman is teaching that when a Jew claps his hands, he's also activating the Jubilee, the number 50, the 50 gates of understanding. And now he's going to explain to what context do we need this? What does this mean to us on a practical level? Let us see what he says. בחינת 50 פעמים יצאת מצרים שנזכר בתורה, שעל ידי בחינת יובל יצאנו ממצרים. Fine. ושם, so now, it's an amazing point. We were slaves in Egypt. What specifically, what characteristic, what attribute specifically do we say was really in bondage, in slavery? Watch what he says. He says, Vesham haya hadibur bagalut. The power to daven, the power to pray, that is what was enslaved. That was what was in bondage. That was the galut. When we say galut Mitzrayim, the slavery, the exile, the bondage of being in Egypt is specifically that speech was in exile, was in Egypt. Because Mitzrayim, Rebbe Nachman teaches elsewhere in Likutei Moharan, lesson 62, Mitzrayim, the land Egypt, Mitzrayim is etymologically similar to the word Metzar, Metzarim. Mitzrayim is like Metzar, the straits, the tightness, referring to Metzar HaGaron, the tightness of the throat. In other words, and also Paro and Mitzrayim. Paro is the letters of the nape, N-A-P-E, the back of the neck, and Mitzrayim is the tightness, Metzar HaGaron, the tightness from the front. So Pharaoh from the back, the nape, the back of the neck, and the land, the people of Egypt from the front, were caused a spiritual deficiency and effect on the Jewish people that they couldn't talk, they couldn't express themselves to Hashem, they couldn't daven. The power and ability for speech was in exile. Even trying to daven, too overwhelmed with slavery, confusions, lack of clarity in the head. That was the bondage, not allowing the Jews to be able to express themselves in prayer. That, by the way, is why when it says that and Pharaoh died, in other words, he was stricken with leprosy, right, in the Torah, like Rashi says. One opinion says Pharaoh actually died. A second opinion, it was the same Pharaoh, but he was stricken with leprosy. So that in both explanations means that there was like a severing of the grasp of Pharaoh from the back. So if that allowed, it gave like a moment for the Jews to cry out. That's why it says in the Torah, at that point when Pharaoh died, according to two opinions, Vaye'anchu b'nei Israel, the Jews finally let out a sigh up to Hashem, and that sigh reached God, because it was a moment where there was a lack of pressure, a grasp from Pharaoh, even though there was still tightness from the front, but it gave room for the Jews to let out some type of a gasping and a sighing towards God, even without words. Anacha means, oh, right? Without words still, but that was enough already to now activate Hashem's compassion, like he told afterwards Moshe Rabbeinu, I've seen, and also the Torah itself says afterwards that Hashem heard their screams and their sighing, and then Hashem remembered his covenant, and at that point he was ready to redeem the Jews. He was waiting for them to let out some type of a krechts in Yiddish, a crying out, and that's what actually happened when they had that opportunity of an opening. But again, the point is that speech was in exile. So that also, by extension, when you feel a lack of ability to talk to Hashem, to pray to God, whether it's the actual siddur or any other format of prayer, you cannot express yourself. That's showing that your speech is in galut, your speech is in exile, and meaning it's a reference to the galut of Mitzrayim, the exile of Egypt. So look what he says: "V'sham haya dibur begalut, v'al yedei hageulah." But through the redemption, which is gematria, again, me said is 40 plus 10, it's the number 50. But through the number 50, which is the redemption, and he's pointing out, take a look at the word geula. Gimel is 3, okay? Aleph is 1, that's 4. Vav is 6, 6 plus 4, that's 10. K Lamed is 30, so that's 40. And then Hey is 5, that's 45. And he said, Hageula, the redemption. The first Hey is another 5, that's 50. Amazing. So the redemption is Gematria 50, and it's Gematria me. Through the Geula, through the 50 activated, Nitave Bechinat Pe, the mouth is created. A person creates a mouth to be able to speak to God and speech, a mouth and speech. Pe v'dibur, Bechinat. Now he shows us why he brought in the word or the term me. Who? Because the word me is referring to the verse in Exodus in Shmot, chapter 4, verse 11. What did Hashem tell Moshe when Moshe said, Hashem, don't send me. I'm kvad peh. I'm a babbler. I'm a heavy speaker. I can't speak properly. So what did Hashem say to Moshe Rabbeinu? Mi sam pel adam. Who placed in the first place a mouth to man, right? And the wording of the verse is me, as if to say, he's not asking, and Hashem is on the simple translation, Hashem is asking a question. Mi sam pe. Who do you think gave a man a mouth in the first place? But Rabbi Nachman's reading it as a statement, an expression. Me, 50, the number 50, is what sampe, is what gives a person the faculty and ability to speak. In other words, when the number 50 is activated, and in our context, by clapping the hands, 5 times 5, 25 times 2, right, left, right, like we said, 50 is activated. That is what gives a person the ability to speak. The hands activate the spiritual energy, the spiritual aspect of the lungs, the lobes, the wings of the lungs to let out air, to speak. Okay? And gives a person to have freedom of speech. It's a funny expression. When we say freedom of speech, in other words, freedom of speech to say the words of davening without external foreign influence, not allowing a person to talk to Hashem. No heaviness experienced. Okay? So that's me sampe. That's why he was saying all along, Rebbe Nachman, the word me, which has the numerical value as 50. The peh, and the mouth afterwards receives within it, because the mouth is up over here, it receives from within it, into it, the words from the lungs, from the wings of the lungs. So when 50 is activated, it causes the lungs to be able to produce words of prayer, and this comes up to the mouth. So it's as if we say 50, which is connected to the lungs of the lungs of the person causing the air. Sampe, that's what creates the mouth to be able to be a vessel to speak words. So here Rabbi Nachman gave us a totally different perspective than what we saw in lesson 44. That now clapping the hands, the location of the arms, by the way, and the hands are, if you want to say, connected to, number one, the heart. The heart is like the torso. The arms joining the body over here by the shoulders, etc. They are now they have the same leveling as the beginning top part of the heart and also the lungs. So it's as if the hands, which are the expression of the whole arms, they give this energy into the lungs. And also, if you notice, when you clap your hands, normally you're clapping in the area leveled more or less to the area of the lungs. And that's what he's saying also, that the hands, the kapayim, they activate the power of the lungs to be able to produce speech. Okay, we will stop here at this point. Thank you so much for joining and also being patient to wait for when I come to the classes. My apologies about that. Please feel free to connect and to comment or anything you have to say about this class. You can always get back to me at this email address, Meir, Meire, at Breslov, Breslov.org. You'll see on the screen, hopefully. I spelled it again wrong. I'm sorry about that. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Roy. Thank you, Michal. Thank you, Miss Andy. Thank you, Beryl. Thank you, Teresa. Good to see all of you people. Thank you, Isabella. Thank you, Joshua. Thank you, Miss Stoneman. Great to see all of you. Have a beautiful week and get ready for Shabbat Zachor, B'ezrat Hashem. And again, as I always say, homework, please take a look. After every class that we give, it's always worth seeing Rav Noson's prayer on this lesson so you can be able to express the ideas of this lesson in prayer format. So if you have a chance to see prayers 44 to 46, which are one prayer in Rav Noson's 50th gate, take a look at that prayer in its entirety, and I hope it'll be much more enhanced after hearing this class. Thank you, everybody. All the best, and be well. Shalom, shalom.